I told my ex's sister, "Stay here, storm's too bad." She said, "Only if I'm not taking the couch." The rain arrived like it had been holding a grudge against the world for years. Thunder cracked so violently that the windows of my old farmhouse trembled, and the power flickered until darkness swallowed every room except for the pale glow of a single lantern. I had spent months learning to live with silence after the worst heartbreak of my life, believing nothing could surprise me anymore. But that night, as headlights struggled through the sheets of rain and stopped in my driveway, I saw a familiar figure standing outside my door, soaked from head to toe, carrying nothing except a small overnight bag and a face that looked even more broken than mine had ever been. I never imagined that the sister of the woman who shattered my heart would become the person who slowly taught me how to believe in love again. Before we continue, if you believe kindness deserves another chance and that even broken hearts can heal, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us the human heart is stronger than we think. I had not spoken to Emily in almost a year. She had always been different from her older sister, Claire. While Claire chased excitement and rarely looked back, Emily noticed the quiet details everyone else ignored. During the years Claire and I dated, Emily was the one who remembered birthdays, helped neighbors shovel snow, and quietly comforted people without asking for recognition. Even after Claire ended our relationship through a short phone call and left town with someone else, Emily sent one message simply saying she was sorry things had ended that way. I never answered because I believed the entire chapter needed to stay closed forever. Yet life has a strange way of reopening doors we swear we locked forever. She stood on my porch shivering as rainwater dripped from her hair onto the wooden floorboards. The storm had flooded several roads, and her small car had broken down just a few miles away. She had walked through the storm because my farmhouse was the closest place she knew. Looking into her exhausted eyes, I saw someone carrying far more than wet clothes and a broken vehicle. Without hesitation, I told her to stay because the storm was too dangerous. Then, after a long silence filled only by thunder, she gave a tired smile and quietly admitted she would only stay if she wasn't taking the couch. Those simple words caught me completely off guard. Not because of romance. Because they revealed how exhausted she truly was. She had spent weeks sleeping on friends' sofas after leaving the apartment she once shared with Claire. Their relationship as sisters had completely fallen apart after years of buried arguments, family pressure, and painful misunderstandings. Emily had finally chosen peace over constant conflict, even though it meant having nowhere permanent to call home. The farmhouse had 2 bedrooms. One had become little more than storage after I convinced myself no one would ever stay long enough to use it. That night, I cleared away dusty boxes while the storm continued pounding against the roof like waves crashing against cliffs. It wasn't glamorous. The wallpaper peeled in places. The heater groaned every few minutes. But for the first time in months, the house no longer felt abandoned. Morning arrived quietly. The storm had passed, leaving behind fresh air and fields sparkling beneath the rising sun. Emily insisted on helping clean before arranging for her car to be repaired. Watching her sweep the porch while humming softly reminded me how different kindness looked when it came naturally instead of being performed for attention. Days turned into one unexpected week. The mechanic discovered flood damage that required expensive repairs, and every nearby hotel was packed because of the storm. I told myself it was simply practical for her to remain until everything was sorted out. But practical slowly became personal. Every evening we cooked together. Every morning we shared coffee on the porch watching fog rise across the fields. Sometimes we barely spoke at all. Oddly enough, silence stopped feeling lonely. Still, guilt lived inside me. No matter how much I enjoyed having Emily around, she was still my ex's sister. The thought alone felt like crossing a line I never intended to approach. The town didn't help. Small communities survive on rumors almost as much as they survive on hard work. Before long, neighbors began asking careful questions with knowing smiles. Some hinted that fate worked in mysterious ways. Others quietly judged us without knowing a single detail. Instead of bringing us closer, the gossip pushed me away. I started creating distance. Longer hours repairing fences. More time working in the barn. Anything to convince myself I wasn't beginning to care about someone I had no right to care about. Emily noticed. She never complained. Instead, she quietly packed her repaired car one afternoon. She thanked me for everything, hugged me gently, and prepared to leave. Watching her drive toward the highway, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Claire left. Except this time, it wasn't heartbreak born from betrayal. It was regret born from fear. I realized I wasn't protecting either of us. I was simply running away again. 3 months passed. Autumn painted the countryside gold and crimson. Life returned to its lonely routine. Then one afternoon I received an unexpected letter. Inside was an invitation to a community fundraiser organized by Emily. The event aimed to restore homes damaged during the storms that had devastated nearby families earlier that year. At the bottom she had written only one sentence. "I thought you'd want to help." Nothing more. No expectations. No hidden message. Just trust. I went. Hundreds of volunteers filled the community center. Emily moved through the crowd with incredible patience, coordinating supplies, comforting frightened children, and making every overwhelmed family feel seen. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply cared. Watching her that day changed something inside me. Love wasn't dramatic speeches. It wasn't grand gestures. Sometimes love looked like carrying heavy boxes without being asked. Listening without interrupting. Remembering everyone's names. Choosing compassion even after life had been unfair. As weeks became months, we worked together almost every weekend rebuilding damaged homes. Every nail hammered into fresh would seem to rebuild something inside me too. People slowly stopped whispering. Instead, they saw two ordinary people trying to make their town a little better. One snowy evening after finishing another volunteer project, Emily finally shared the truth she had carried for years. She confessed she had always admired the way I treated people, even when Claire and I were together. Not because she wanted what her sister had, but because she hoped one day someone might look at her with the same respect and patience. She admitted staying during the storm had terrified her. She worried I would blame her for everything Claire had done. Instead, she found forgiveness she never expected. Her honesty left me speechless. I realized both of us had spent years apologizing for wounds we never created. Claire's choices belonged to Claire. They didn't define Emily. They didn't define me either. The hardest conversation still remained. Our families. Some supported us. Others believed our growing relationship was inappropriate simply because of our past connection through Claire. The criticism hurt. There were holidays we skipped. Family dinners we weren't invited to. People who refused to understand. For a while, I wondered whether everyone else might be right. Then I remembered something my grandfather used to say. You build a life with the people who show up when storms come. Emily had shown up during the worst storm of the year. Then she stayed through every emotional storm afterward. Not once because she had to. Always because she chose to. Spring returned almost exactly 1 year after the night she knocked on my door. The farmhouse looked different. Fresh paint covered the weathered walls. Flowers bloomed beside the porch. The spare bedroom was no longer filled with forgotten boxes. It had become a welcoming guest room because loneliness no longer owned the house. One evening we sat together watching another thunderstorm roll across the distant hills. This time neither of us feared it. Storms eventually pass. They always do. I looked at Emily and understood that healing had never arrived in one dramatic moment. It came through ordinary mornings. Shared laughter. Forgiveness. Patience. Trust built one day at a time. I finally understood why that first night mattered so much. When I had offered her shelter from the storm, I believed I was rescuing her. The truth was exactly the opposite. She had quietly rescued me from a future built entirely around bitterness. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts because your support helps these stories reach people who truly need hope. Special request, before the ending, please leave a comment answering this question: do you believe the greatest love stories often begin after life's biggest heartbreaks? Months later, standing on that same porch where everything had begun, I thought back to the terrified woman standing in the rain asking for nothing more than a place to sleep without feeling like a burden. Neither of us could have imagined how one compassionate decision would reshape two broken lives forever. We discovered that forgiveness does not erase painful memories, but it removes their power to control tomorrow. We learned that families are imperfect, people make painful mistakes, and love often arrives quietly disguised as simple kindness. Looking across the fields glowing beneath another peaceful sunrise, I realized happiness had never returned because life became perfect. It returned because two wounded hearts stopped measuring each other by old scars and started building something entirely new together. Sometimes the strongest relationships are not born from perfect timing, but from the courage to open the door during someone's darkest storm. And every time thunder echoes across those hills now, it reminds us that the night which seemed destined to become another painful memory was actually the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of our lives.